Hey everybody, Backpack Hack here coming at you with another trail tip about photography. Why photography? Well, a lot of people when they go out on their adventures, they want to take pictures. And we all pretty much carry a camera these days, whether it's in our cell phone or we have a little compact camera. Some people even go so far as having a full-size DSLR. However, one thing that a lot of people will have is a tripod, but carrying something like this on a backpack trip is going to be hard to justify. And even though there are tripods that are designed for small, compact, and lightweight travel, it's not a perfect solution. So today I want to talk to you about how to handle your camera to eliminate what's called motion blur, specifically moving the camera while the exposure is being taken. A lot of times you'll take a picture with whatever camera you're using, and you take a picture and you look at it and it looks great. But when you get it home on the computer, it's blurry, and you think, well, the camera missed focus. Well, it may be in perfect focus. It may be that you moved your camera when you took the exposure. To explain this a little bit better, photographs are not taken in a very, very small, minute fraction of a trillionth of a second. There's not an infinite small amount of time that an exposure is being taken. It takes a little bit of time to collect the light and create an exposure. And if you're not careful, while it is taking that exposure, you move the camera one way or the other. You turn it, you twist it, you somehow move that camera while it's making the exposure. This can result in what is called motion blur or camera blur. It's not that the subject is moving, but you are moving your camera. Think of it this way. You have a subject that you're taking a photograph of. If the subject is moving, that can blur the image. It can come up blurry. Well, relative speaking, the same thing happens with your camera. If you're moving your camera and your subject is still, you still get that same blur. This can be identified. First off, let's talk about the technical side of it a little bit. You need to identify it, what it actually looks like. When you first look at a photograph, you may think, oh, it's just out of focus. But if you look at it closely, if you actually take that image and enlarge it on your computer screen, you'll begin to notice a few things. First off, this example of the bald eagle. If you look at the beak, you'll notice the tip of the beak is not a sharp point. In fact, it's a line across the image. And if we were to draw a line next to that and start looking at other visual clues in this image, such as under the eyes, we will see a similar line. Same thing with the nostril, and we start looking around this photograph and we can see all sorts of examples of this same blurring effect. Imagine this, instead of being a photograph, being a painting, and all the paint is wet, and you put your hand on it and you smear it all in one direction. That's what it looks like. You can also verify this by looking at details in the image, such as the edge of an item. If the edge of the item is parallel to the movement of the camera, it will appear sharp. But something that is perpendicular to the motion of the camera will appear very, very blurry. And the farther you get away from parallel to closer to perpendicular, the more that you will see that apparent smearing. These are classic examples of camera movement, which means that you have moved the camera. Now, carrying a tripod is going to be the ultimate in camera steadying, but like I say, carrying something like this on a backpack trip is hard to justify, and even some gram Nazis are not even going to want to take this, which is far from a perfect solution. In fact, it's going to be hard to be able to use something like this when your grass is 2 foot tall. This is kind of useless. So what are some of the things that you can do to have good, sharp photographs that don't involve using a tripod or any mechanical means? That's the ultimate goal of this video, is to teach you some of the basics of how to handle your camera properly and eliminate that motion blur. So let's get started. The first rule you want to learn is the 1/f rule. F meaning the focal length of the lens that you're using. All cameras have a focal length marked on the lenses. This is a 28 to 300 millimeter lens. So what I want to do is put 1/28 if I'm shooting at 28 millimeters, and I want to shoot at roughly a 1/30th of a second. If I'm shooting here, I'd want to have 1/50th of a second. If I'm shooting at this focal length, I'd want to have about 1/100th of a second. Here I'd want to shoot at 1/200th of a second, and here I would want to shoot at 1/300th of a second. This is a general guideline. It's not a hard and fast rule. In other words, if you're shooting at, say, 200 millimeters and you shoot at 125th of a second, the shutter speed police aren't going to come and arrest you. And in fact, that's the purpose of this video, is to allow you to shoot at slower shutter speeds than this guideline. Granted, some people will not be able to shoot steady at a 200th of a second at 200 millimeter. They may have to go to a 300th of a second or a 500th of a second. This is not a hard and fast rule. It is simply a guideline. The next thing you want to do is turn your image stabilization off. Wait, what? Whatever image stabilization your camera has, you want to turn it off? Well, yes, you want to turn that off. In fact, of the 46 lenses that I currently own for all my cameras, only 6 of them have this image stabilization, and only 1 has it turned on by default. The rest of them are turned off. Why? This is not a set and forget system. And in fact, on a bright sunny day like this, when I'm shooting at higher shutter speeds, I don't need the image stabilization. And in fact, it can hurt your images. It can be deployed when it doesn't need to be deployed and can actually cause your image to be blurred by whatever mechanism your camera uses to stabilize the image. It would normally be a great shot, but because it thinks it needs to correct the image, it actually blurs it. So only turn it on when you need it, when you are shooting at those slower shutter speeds. If you're shooting sports at, let's say, 1,000th or 2,000ths of a second, you don't need that image stabilization. Your shutter speed is going to capture it and prevent you from moving that camera. So this is not a set and forget. Turn it off unless you need it. Next, the ISO of a camera. You can see here that I've got it set for 100. A common misconception among newbies is they're told to shoot at the lowest ISO that is possible for their camera. This was fine 20, 25, 30 years ago when digital cameras first came out, and they were basically very rudimentary machines. However, the technology has improved, and I've seen a lot of pictures ruined because somebody thought they had to shoot at ISO 100 or 200 or whatever the base ISO of their camera is. So don't be afraid to get that ISO up. Move it up. Today's cameras are good at 600, 800, 1600. Those ISOs are just fine these days. You don't have to worry about the grain that you get, that noise that you see in the images. And even if you do get some, modern technology with software can deal with it. So don't be afraid to get that ISO up. Let's talk about your heart rate and your respiration a little bit. Let's say you've just climbed this great big tall hill. You've got this beautiful panorama in front of you. It's natural to just want to take out your phone and take a picture of it. However, that's not exactly the best idea. Your heart is just a pounding. You're breathing hard. And these are all things that cause you to be moving. The idea is you want to hold that camera still. So we're going to take a little bit. We're going to let our heart rate come down. We're going to let our respiration come down to normal levels. And we're going to take a page right out of a firearms user's handbook, and we're going to control our heart rate and our respiration. Now, there isn't anything you can do to stop your heart, but you can hold your breath for a few seconds. So first off, we're going to let our heart rate come down to normal levels, where it should be at rest, because that scene isn't going to go anywhere. So now that our heart rate and our respiration is down, now we can do what we came here to do. So our heart rate is down. Breathing techniques. What we're going to do is we're going to inhale, exhale halfway, hold it, and then take our picture. So there's our scene. We're going to inhale, exhale halfway, hold it, and now we can take our picture. Whatever you do, don't just jam the camera. Don't hold your finger up off that shutter button and jam it. See how it's moving the camera when I do that? What you want to do is place your finger on top of the button and slowly press down. And then you have a nice, steady camera when you take the photograph. No matter what camera you're using, don't put your feet together when you use it. Spread those feet apart just a little bit. Even 1.5 feet will make a big difference in the stability of your upper body. Don't take a picture with your feet together. Spread those feet apart. If at all possible, don't just stand there even with your feet apart to take a photograph. If you have something solid to lean against it. Better yet, take your body mostly out of the equation and hold your camera right up against that solid object. Perfect. If there's something you can set your camera on that will get you the photograph you want, by all means do it, and this will eliminate your body movement completely from the equation. It may take a little bit of finagling to get the image you want, but use the device's self-timer, and that way you aren't even touching the camera when it takes the photograph. This is the exact same technique that I used to take the footage of the waterfall at the beginning of this video. I simply set the camera on a rock, hit the record button, and let the camera run for a minute or two. Does your camera have the ability to shoot a series of photographs in one shutter depression? Meaning, instead of taking a bunch of shots, shooting them one at a time, moving your finger, can you set it to take a series of photographs, and as you hold the button down, it will take a series of photographs. This way you don't constantly press on the shutter button, you press on it once, and it takes a series of photographs. Now some people are going to say this is cheating, some people say it's spraying and praying. But if it's a technique that gets you a sharp photograph simply by employing it, I say thumbs up, you're doing good. Another technique is to simply get down low. The lower you are to the ground, the less likely you're to move around. And a technique that I like to teach people is to turn your body into its own monopod. I make sure that my lower leg is straight up and down. I put my left elbow on my left knee, give my camera a cradle, and I basically have a monopod here to shoot with that's quite sturdy. Try it sometime. Better yet, don't be afraid to get down and get dirty. Get those elbows apart, and you got a great bipod to shoot with. And finally, practice, practice, practice. Use the techniques that I've shown you here in this video, practice them, use them until they become second nature, because carrying one of these into the backcountry is generally not going to be a very viable option. Now you're probably wondering, why do I need to learn all this if I've got image stabilization in my camera or my lens? Simply put, it's not a perfect solution, and it has its drawbacks as well as its limitations. So by knowing how to use your camera correctly without that image stabilization, you can get sharper photographs. So this is Backpack Cat coming at you with this trail tip. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share my videos. Be safe out there, and I'll see you out on the trail.